Grab your favorite beverage. It's time for the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to Week 7 AFC home games here on the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. I have a special guest on this week, my buddy from home, Mr. Kevin Burke. Kev, what's going on, dude? Welcome to the show.
What's up, Matt Matador? How you doing, bro?
I'm doing good, man. I got a nice cold beer. I got 6 AFC home games ready to bang out here on this Wednesday night. I'm so happy that I got you on the show. We did an episode of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast last year together, and I feel like we had a pretty good time. How'd you feel about that episode?
Dude, I think anytime I'm on the phone with you, hanging out with you, we always got to have a good time. So I'm ready to do this again. Pumped. It's football season, fantasy football. Can't wait to talk about some fantasy football with you.
Hell yeah. So let's get started by giving you a minute to tell us and the fans, the listeners of the show, what you love about fantasy football, why you play fantasy football, give us a good war story, and then I'm going to prop you up about your defending championship in one of the leagues that me and you started a few years back. So go ahead, tell us a little bit about your fantasy life so far.
Well, I mean, been playing fantasy football for about 10 years now. I don't know if I really have any good war stories, but I mean, I love football. So to be more engaged with football, I started playing fantasy football, and it just sucks you in. Once you start playing, you start following every game, every player, and then, your wife starts hating you, and then you have kids, and your kids start hating you because all you're doing is paying attention to football during football season. But hey, it happens, right?
It's only half the year.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, man. I'm pretty much watching NFL Network every day.
Yeah, same. Even during
the season or off season, I'm always watching the NFL.
Same, dude. Same. I pretty much I sleep to the NFL Network, and then I wake up and the NFL Network's on. There's nothing better in the morning than Good Morning Football. I love those guys. So me and you, we started the all defensive player, called it the D League, fantasy league. About, what is this? We're on year 7 or 8 right now.
7, yeah, I forget. It is 7 or 8. And you know what? Just a little word to the wise people out there. You gotta try this.
It's so much fun.
You gotta try this type of league because it's different, but it's so much fun.
To me, it makes watching football more intense because you're not only just watching for offensive players making plays, you're looking for defensive players making plays. It kind of, to me, I think it helps in the regular fantasy leagues because it kind of gives you a little more knowledge as to how defenses are played and how certain defenses have their base alignment and what players are really the best on which teams. And to me, especially looking at wide receiver cornerback matchups, I feel like this league has really opened my eyes to those cover corners and how valuable it is to kind of avoid those guys. What's one thing about the D League that has maybe helped you in your other fantasy leagues so far? I hate to put you on the spot like this, but I know you can handle it.
No, dude, well, I mean, it's like you said, you're watching more than just one side of the football. You're starting to pay attention to like defensive fronts, different, like whether they're running nickel, dime. I mean, they're running cover 2. You're playing, whether you got a cornerback playing press coverage on a wide receiver every week. So then you're going to know, okay, well, he's playing press, so it's not going to be a free release all the time, when they're playing soft coverage and you're getting that free release. It makes you pay attention to the matchup. So when you have a running back coming against a certain defense, you're kind of like, okay, well, they're loading the box on this guy, or they're running, a 4-3 as opposed to a 3-4. There's just little things like that you start to pay attention to when you're watching constantly, like analyzing both sides of the ball. I mean, not to say that not everybody does that just plays the offensive, fantasy football, but I mean, I don't know, in my opinion, when I started doing the defensive league, I just started really analyzing a lot more as I watched the game.
Right. Yeah, I like it, man, and it's definitely I'm not going to say more random, but more games are won by those crazy plays on a Monday night football game or something like that. I feel like my IDP league always comes down to Monday night football every week, which is awesome. Sometimes you'll be in a fantasy league, and for people like me and you who are in multiple leagues, it probably doesn't happen all that often, but I imagine it happens all the time where if you're only in one league, maybe two leagues, you don't have an offensive player going on Monday Night Football, so you don't really have, if the Browns are playing the friggin' Buccaneers, right, and most people don't really care about that game, but if you have a player going on Monday night, it kind of keeps you involved in those games. So
you're watching that game,
right? So maybe those IDP, the IDP players kind of help keep you invested in more games.
Oh yeah, I think it was the 49ers Browns game 2 Mondays ago. Literally on the first play of the game when Breida ran for like 80-something yards or whatever it might have been.
Right.
I was down 98 to like 101 from that one play.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah, those are always fun.
But anyways, you ready to get into this or what?
Yeah, dude. Let's kick it off with the Thursday night preview. The Kansas City Chiefs going to Denver to play the Broncos in an AFC West showdown. The Chiefs coming off of the loss against the Texans. Patrick Mahomes with a 273-yard passing game. How often do we see this dude throw for under 300 yards?
It's very uncommon.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be realistic. But the whole thing with Mahomes, everybody has to remember right now, is he's not Patrick Mahomes right now. He's gimping around on that bad ankle. His offensive line is just not the same, so he's running for his life back there trying to get rid of the damn ball.
Yeah, and plus right now going into this Thursday night game, they've already confirmed that 2 of their starting offensive linemen will be out, along with Sammy Watkins being out. So that offensive line's not getting any better either.
It's gonna be a rough outing for Mahomes. You're never not gonna start Mahomes, but just beware that he's not going to be putting up 50-plus touchdowns, 5,000 yards. Like, I remember in the first 3 games, everybody's talking about, oh, my God, he could be on pace for 6,000 yards and 58 touchdowns. All right, everybody, pump your brakes, come back down to earth.
Pump the brakes.
It's not going to happen. He's still going to have great stats, but he's got to get healthy. He's got to get healthy, and that offensive line's got to get healthy. It's not going to be the same Patrick Mahomes for the next couple of weeks until they go on their bye. When is their bye?
I don't know. I don't know that. That's something I need to get another monitor for that.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, honestly, their bye couldn't come sooner. I mean, because at this point they're in rough shape. But again, you're never not going to start Mahomes. You're always going to start him. Just beware.
Yeah, it was his first game under 300 yards this week, or this year. So and he had an interception plus a fumble, so that's something that we're not used to seeing him, having multiple turnovers in a game. The guy I want to focus on in this game actually is Damian Williams and how uninvolved he's become. 12 touches in the previous 2 games, and then only 2 last week. His snap counts have decreased every week from 66% to 52 to 22, down to 12% last week. He's being used less and less on offense, yet his snap counts on special teams have gone up from 3% in week 1 to 50% in the past 2 games. So they're starting to use him in a different way. They're not giving him the ball as much as they were when LaShawn McCoy and Darrell Williams were both healthy. And Darrell Williams wasn't used at all in the running game last week either, but DeAnthony Thomas was. Remember this dude, little tiny guy, little speedster.
Yeah.
But and plus the Broncos' run D has really come on lately. Over the first couple games of the season, they gave up 2 touchdowns in week 1 to Josh Jacobs, a touchdown to Montgomery in week 2 against against the Bears. In week 3, 2 touchdowns against Aaron Jones, and then in week 4 they gave up 245 total yards to Leonard Fournette. But in the past two games, they've looked pretty good. Against the Chargers in Week 5, only 130 total yards to the Chargers running backs, which is saying a lot considering how good those two guys are. And then last week against Derrick Henry, held him to 33 total yards. So it's not the greatest matchup for him. He's not being used all that much. I think you kind of have to sit Damian Williams. I think unless LaShawn McCoy is hurt or out, I'm not sure if you can really trust him going forward until he shows us that he's going to, continue to get more work. And plus, this was the second week in a row now where the Chiefs only ran the ball 10 times with their running backs. So
I was going to say, unless you were you're desperate for a bye place or a bye week replacement, stay away from that backfield. I mean, there's only a few people on that team because, you brought up how the Broncos are looking better. They're starting to look like they have Vic Fangio defense.
Yeah, right.
They're finally starting to come together. And, once that starts to come together, I mean, that's going to be – it was today I was listening to a podcast that could this team be the Broncos? Could they be last year's Colts, where the Colts start off like, what was it, like 2-5 or something like that, and then they just ripped off like 9 straight wins or something like that?
Yeah,
they started off really slow.
They got the same formula: run the ball, play defense, right?
Yep, exactly. And now this, because we were talking, we'll go back to the Chiefs real quick, where we were talking about, backfield, stay away from. Another guy that I know people are starting to get concerned about is Travis Kelce. I mean, his past 3 games, he was 4 catches for 58 yards, 4 catches for 70 yards, and 7 catches for 85 yards. Now, that is not our typical Travis Kelce. And until Patrick Mahomes gets better, I don't really see Kelce getting much better, getting many yards. And he also hasn't had any touchdowns in those past 3 games. He needs to be better for his quarterback, especially in the situation his quarterback is in. But with his quarterback hobbling around and not really being able to push off that back foot and throw the ball and just, really get it downfield or being able to scramble, you actually what you could do if the Kelce owner is out there and you're looking for a tight end, you could probably go out and offer a trade to that owner because, not for nothing, he's probably sitting there getting a little antsy, wondering where the hell Travis Kelce is. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, only 1 game so far this year with double-digit fantasy points. It was a 100-yard, 1 touchdown game against Oakland. But I think with Tyreek Hill coming back, that is definitely going to help Travis Kelce. It can only help Travis Kelce because you're going to see a lot of the tension, the extra attention that was going to Kelce is going to have to go towards Tyreek Hill now. He showed that he could come right back from that injury and produce right away with a 2-touchdown game. He did only catch 5 of his 10 targets, but he's one of these deep threat guys that these guys don't catch all their targets. You can't connect on every single deep pass. So 80 yards receiving, he looked awesome, and I think he's only going to help Travis Kelce. The guy that I'm worried about in the pass game is Demarcus Robinson. I think his days as a starter are over. He was only targeted 4 times last week. He did not catch any of them. I think between him and McCole Hardman, the guy that is obviously going to stay more relevant is the guy that they just spent a first or a second-round pick on last year in McCole Hardman, especially with Sammy Watkins being out. Maybe this is the last week that we do get some from Demarcus Robinson with Sammy Watkins being out, but it's kind of a lot of mouths to feed there, really, if everyone is healthy, especially Byron Pringle coming on lately as well. So it's a crowded game crowded team for sure. Let's go over to the Broncos though, because I got some pretty cool stuff here on the Broncos running backs in the pass game. So both of these guys, Freeman and Lindsey, they have 26 carries for 145 and 140. I'm sorry. They each have 26 catches. One of them, Freeman with 145 yards, Lindsey with 147 yards. So they're pretty much producing the same. But last week we did see Freeman with 5 targets versus Lindsey's 3 targets, and Freeman had 42 yards on those those targets that he got. So Freeman's pretty much averaging 4 to 5 targets a game. He's caught 70% of them. These Broncos RBs had a good matchup in the pass game last week, and we saw Freeman, play better than Lindsey. So I think in this week, you look at the Chiefs; they're allowing the 6th and the 9th most receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So it's another good matchup for these running backs being used in the pass game, and I think Freeman is going to see even more targets this week than he saw last week. So I have him in one of my leagues where I'm kind of hurting at running back with Chubb on a bye, so I think I kind of have to play Freeman this week. It is a half-point PPR league, so I'm totally fine with it. Do you own any stock in either of these two Bronco running backs, and how do you feel about them if so?
So I own I got one of my 5 teams that I have Royce Freeman on, who I just recently started putting him in because I was running real thin, which turned out to not be a bad thing. But the one thing that I did notice that is highly awkward, because Royce Freeman is a pretty large running back and tested in agility actually higher than Philip Lindsay did coming out of the draft there. And the thing that I'm finding very, very awkward right now is that Philip Lindsay is running more in the red zone than Royce Freeman. So that's something to absolutely keep an eye on, because red zone a lot of times equals touchdowns. So, keep that in mind. Other than that, man, I don't really have any stock in Philip Lindsay. Royce Freeman, like you brought up, he's catching the ball more, and he's also becoming more of the third down back. You're seeing more Philip Lindsay first and second, and then you're getting Royce Freeman coming in on third down. But they're mixing it up. They're mixing it up nicely. It's actually working out pretty well for both.
It's kind of strange. It's like you would think it would be the other way around, where you have the bigger back on first and second, and you have the smaller, more nimble back on third down. But I guess the Broncos are doing it the other way around.
Yeah, man. Hey, they're rewriting the script, huh?
Yeah, they're doing what works.
Well, I was also going to say, we didn't really bring up any of the wide receivers. I don't know if you were going to or not, but Cortland Sutton seems to be the really only reliable receiving threat in that. Personally, that's how I feel from what I've seen. But also keep in mind, Flacco, he still doesn't look great. So I'm actually not really thrilled about either one of those wide receivers, to be quite honest, especially with Emmanuel Sanders having that knee problem when he tore his Achilles last year. I don't really know if that has anything to do with each other,
right,
but that's something to keep an eye on. I have him in one league. I am absolutely not starting him, solely because of, first of all, I don't know how that knee is going to hold up, and second of all, Flacco, again, maybe it's because he's just getting used to the new offensive system that he's in, but he just doesn't look right. I don't know what it is. He doesn't look right. I'm staying away.
I think you're totally right about the whole injury thing. I think they have to be correlated. We've seen so many times where a guy injures a knee. Look at Dalvin Cook, tore an ACL. Next year, he's got hamstring issues, right? It happens all the time. I think they have to be, they have to be connected in some way. So yeah, I have on my notes, as far as the wide receivers go, I'm staying away from Emmanuel Sanders if I do own him, and I think Cortland Sutton is obviously the number one guy there. So I completely agree with you. So let's move on here to the next game. We got two Jets fans, two diehard Jet fans here on the podcast talking about the Patriots at the Jets. Kev, I was kind of joking around how, at this point in the season, usually every year, you look at the Jets Pats games, and those are really the only games that I care about, really, because by this time we're usually in the dumpster anyway.
I usually cry myself to sleep and thank my dad for, allowing me to be a Jets fan when the rest of his family were Giants fans. Could have celebrated, two Super Bowls in my lifetime, but no, celebrate none. Get your heart broken.
It would have been 4 Super Bowls in your lifetime. The 2 with Bill Parcells, right? You were born in 85, 86?
86.
Yeah, so I hear you, man. It sucks. At least you got the Yankees and I got the friggin' Mets. But we won't talk about baseball because it's October.
Yeah. Well, and I don't really care about baseball. So, listen, I don't care what anybody says, but Sammy D is back. Okay? And people want to sit there and say, oh, it's Adam Gase's play calling, and it's not – listen, it's not the quarterback. You're on a third-string quarterback that shouldn't be playing in the damn NFL, okay? He shouldn't be playing in the NFL. Now, given it was Gase's guy, I get it. But he shouldn't be playing in the NFL. And especially when you're watching this kid, he's holding the ball for 10 seconds. And I saw a view of a coach's view, a coach's shot. He's got 3 guys open, and he's holding on to the ball. And now look at the difference that Sam Darnold makes. 338 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. We got to clean that up. But, I mean, come on. Let's go, Sammy.
Yeah, and he had those 2 – I think he had 2 plays where he scrambled for a first down, and both of them were called back for holding. So he would have had another – I think it would have been another 40-something yards rushing if it weren't for those two penalties. And as we all know from looking at Lamar Jackson this year, those rushing yards, they are so valuable to quarterbacks. And for a guy to have the ability to just kind of take off on third down and pick up 8-9 yards a clip to me it makes all the difference. We saw what this Jets offense could look like. In this, they weren't even at 100%. I mean, they didn't have Chris Herndon. We were talking before we hit record how this season they're not going to be they're going to be without Quincy Enunwa, which sucks. But we're starting to see what this offense can really look like. And they put up 24 points against Dallas so far this season. The only team to put up more than 24 points against Dallas was the Packers 2 weeks ago. So I mean, yeah, you got to be encouraged by this. Darnold looked great. Like you said, they got to clean up that interception. I found it interesting that when Darnold came back and played this game, that Le'Veon had his lowest amount of targets and catches and the smallest use in the pass game so far this season. But I guess when you have a competent quarterback back there, you don't have to just constantly dump the ball off to your running back every play. So
and you got to remember they were still loading the box. Because, I mean, let's be fair. Sam Darnold hasn't played since week 1, and he still didn't look very good week 1 because he had mono week 1. So,
and he's still a second-year quarterback, too, who only played, 10 games last year? So it's not like the guy's a seasoned vet by any means.
No, he's not, and he's also in a new system. But, I just think with how Sam Darnold moves the ball around, Le'Veon Bell is going to wind up getting those yards, and he's going to wind up having Le'Veon Bell games because they're going to have to – these defenses are going to have to account for Sam Darnold being able to throw the ball. They're not going to be able to load the box, and you're going to have him coming out of the backfield in little bubble screens. He's going to have a Le'Veon Bell game coming up. I promise you that is going to happen. Maybe not this week, all right? We can't – us Jets fans are a little excited, we're not going to go 0-16. So it's nice to see a game like that last week because, it just goes to show that this team isn't just a one-dimensional team, hand off to Le'Veon Bell, or third down, throw a screen pass to Le'Veon Bell.
Right.
Oh, that's great. 100% of the offense is Le'Veon Bell.
I think once Chris Herndon is back into the offense, I think he's going to really open things up for Le'Veon because you're going to have to account for Robbie Anderson running those deep routes. You're going to have to account for Jamison Crowder running those intermediate routes, and you're going to have to account for Chris Herndon running all those underneath routes, and that's just going to open things up for Le'Veon. So I completely agree. It's going to get better for these guys, especially as Darnold gets more and more healthy, more and more comfortable in this offense. Let's try and to put our fantasy analyst hats on here and put our fandom aside and try and go through this Patriots game real quick. Tom Brady has not looked all that great so far this year. I mean, the Bills game, he did not look good against this Giants team. In the first half, he didn't look good. They are, they're kind of throwing out a mixed match offense every week. They got Brandon Bolden running touchdowns, James White with only 2 carries and negative yardage, rushing. It's kind of a weird Patriots offense, but it doesn't matter because their defense is so good. They've been winning with their defense every week. I said it last week how it's ridiculous that the defending Super Bowl champion has by far the easiest schedule in the NFL. I don't get it. I don't understand how it works out.
Yeah. And 2 weeks to prepare for the Jets. Like, what kind of nonsense is that?
Yeah. So,
but, honestly, on that team, the only reliable fantasy player in my mind is Julian Edelman, because from what it looks like, you're not going to have Josh Gordon, because if you remember that tackle he made on the interception last week.
Yeah, he got his leg all bent up.
Twisted up, dude. It looked nasty.
Yeah, it did.
So you have him, more than likely he's going to be out. We don't know about Philip Dorsett. We don't know if he comes back. Keep your eye out, because that could be a really good pickup, especially if you're looking for someone to replace on the bye. And then another guy to keep your eye out for is Rex Burkhead, because Sony Michel he's been garbage this whole year. He hasn't done anything. So I have a feeling once Rex Burkhead comes back, he's going to start getting more touches, and he's a good running back. He's absolutely a good running back. He's someone to keep your eye on. But again, really, the only reliable starter that is playing is going to be Edelman. All these other guys, you're going to have to wait until like tomorrow when the injury report comes out. This guy's playing, and some of the guys might even be game time, so you might even have to wait until 11:30 on game day to figure out if they're playing or not. So
I think there is, besides Edelman, I think James White is also reliable, especially in PPR leagues at least. So if I had him, I'd definitely feel more than comfortable playing him. The Jets' defense has not been great. It hasn't been bad, but it hasn't been good so far this year. They're pretty much right in the middle of the pack against every position. So yeah, I agree. Julian Edelman, James White. I think if Josh Gordon is out, I definitely agree that Philip Dorsett is the guy to go to. And if both of them are out, what do you think about Jacoby Myers? Because he looked pretty good. He caught all 4 of his targets last week for 54 yards. Tom Brady has shown that if he can trust you, he's going to use you. He doesn't care what your name is, doesn't care what school you're from. Julian Edelman was a quarterback in what a D3 school, and now he's all of a sudden one of the best wide receivers of all time. If you're reliable, Tom Brady will get you the ball. So I think he's worth an ad if both Josh Gordon and Philip Dorsett are out next week.
Absolutely. Listen, everybody's got to keep in mind that a lot of these guys that we're bringing up, a lot of them are bye-week replacements. And Jacoby Myers, in my mind, that would be a bye-week replacement. If you really need a guy that you need to go and find to put to sub in for one of your starters that's on a bye week, Jacoby Myers is a great pickup, because you're right. Like, if you only have Edelman, Tom Brady's going to move the ball around. He always does. He's going to find the open guy, and from preseason till now, it seems like him and Jacoby Myers are on the same page. And again, he seems to trust him, so he's going to get him the ball if he trusts him. So
yeah,
not a big pickup.
Real quick here, because we're already at the 27-minute mark here. So real quick, I'm gonna run through the guys that are on bye this week. So if you have those guys, keep in mind those are the guys. When we're talking about these dudes here in the AFC home games portion, that these are the guys you might want to consider replacing. So you got DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel with the Panthers. You got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin with the Bucks. Juju and maybe Deontay Johnson if you've been frisky over the past few weeks. With the Browns, you got OBJ and Jarvis Landry. So as far as wide receivers go, those are the guys you're worried about replacing. As far as running backs, you got McCaffrey, you got James Conner and Nick Chubb. I think those are really the only guys you have to worry about replacing this week. So we're going to try and speed things up here a little bit. This should be a pretty quick game to go through. The Dolphins at the Bills, another AFC East showdown. So I think I saw that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be starting this game. I don't think it really matters. I think Kenyon Drake is really the only guy on this Dolphins team that you can trust. If you do have one of those 3 running backs that you're in a tough spot to fill that spot. In a PPR league, he's gotten you 10 points in last week. It's not bad. You'll take that on a bye week. But besides that, as far as the Dolphins go, I don't really have anything else to say. What about you?
I literally wrote in my notes, "No, thank you," with a flaming pile of garbage.
So the Bills coming off of a bye. The Bills coming off of trading away Zay Jones to the Raiders, who was tied on the team with Dawson Knox for third on the team in targets this season so far. So and he was also third on the team in air yards, which is kind of saying a lot for a team like the Bills, who they like to air it out with that with Josh Allen and that massive arm that he has.
Massively inaccurate arm.
Yeah. So he was used on deep routes a lot so far, just like John Brown, except Zay Jones only caught 38% of his targets, whereas Brown caught 71%. So, that's why Zay Jones hasn't really been all that great. But, the question now is, where are those 3 or 4 targets a game going to go? Obviously, John Brown and Cole Beasley are number one in the team. They both have 39 targets so far. They had 27 and 28 catches on the season. John Brown's the only one who scored between the two of them, but I think the tight end, Dawson Knox, is the guy who's going to see the most increase in his usage. He's made a couple plays over the past couple weeks. I know Duke Williams came into this game 2 weeks ago, and he scored a touchdown. So, but I'm thinking that Dawson Knox is the guy that the Bills kind of try and get a little bit more involved. Maybe they try and evolve the offense away from just bombing it down the field all the time like we saw against the Patriots 2 weeks ago, and they kind of try and use Dawson Knox in the middle of the field a little bit more. How are you feeling about these Bills wide receivers? Are you interested in anybody in this matchup? I know the Dolphins, they're pretty much horrible at defending everything. They're giving up the most fantasy points to QBs and the 7th most fantasy points to wide receivers.
Well, I would keep my eye out for Devin Singletary. He was a full participant in practice today, which tells you that he's more than likely going to start. And if he's going to start, he's going to start over Frank Gore. It might be a bit of a committee, but he's absolutely going to get more touches than Frank Gore. And from what we've seen in previous games, in preseason, everything like that, he's a special talent. So keep your eyes out for him. Josh Allen is never a bad choice to start a quarterback. I mean, you more than likely have someone else you'd like to start over him, but keep your eye out for Josh Allen, because he's not only going to throw, he's going to run. He's going to use his feet. And as Matt brought up before, Lamar Jackson, we know how important it is in today's game to be able to run as a quarterback. And Josh Allen, that boy can run.
Yeah,
so,
I think he's had 3 rushing touchdowns so far this season.
Yeah, one against us. Yep, we know. That's when we lost the game pretty much.
Yep, yeah. And, to your point about Devin Singletary, I honestly didn't even think of him because I thought he was still, up in the air. The Dolphins are also allowing the most fantasy points to running backs. So, yeah, if Devin Singletary is active, definitely play him. Moving on here to the Jaguars at the Bengals. Both of these teams coming off of a loss. For me, as far as the Jaguars go, the Bengals are allowing the 4th most. They're tied for the most points allowed to running backs. So there's never a better matchup than you can get with this for Leonard Fournette. Hopefully, we see him with another 20-plus touch game, 26 touches last week with over 100 total yards. DJ Shark had a pretty disappointing game last week following his huge 8-catch, 164-yard, 2-touchdown game in Week 5. And I'm going to go out there and say that he's probably going to have a closer game to what we saw last week than what we saw 2 weeks ago. The Bengals secondary, surprisingly, has not been all that bad against wide receivers. They haven't allowed any wide receivers over 89 receiving yards so far this season. They've only allowed 4 wide receiver touchdowns in 6 games, which is actually not all that bad. And last week they held all 4 of the...
It was with Drake Kirkpatrick, so
that's true.
Keep that in mind.
Last week they held all 4 of the Baltimore wide receivers to under 28 yards as well. So, yes, obviously if Drake Kirkpatrick misses this game, that's going to drastically affect their pass defense. But the Bengals' pass defense has not been all that bad. So I'm going to give DJ Shark maybe if you have to put him in your flex, but if you can sit him, I might consider it in this week. I know we kind of went through all those other wide receivers that are on bye right now, so you may not have the opportunity to, but if you're one of the guys that you're not dealing with that situation as far as bye week wide receivers this week, then maybe consider keeping Shark on the bench until we see, because I think the Jaguars are going to just come out and just run the ball all day, first, second, third down, and even fourth down if they have to. So, as far as the Bengals go here, Auden Tate with a 12-target day in Week 6, which now makes him a must-start. I know a couple weeks ago, me and you were talking about, I think you were up in the air between, who the hell was it, Curtis Samuel and somebody else, and I said you should go out and get Auden Tate instead, and he scored you a touchdown. And I think you mentioned that you won that week, so that made me feel really good, Kev.
Did it, Matt?
Yeah, it made me feel really good.
Make you feel good, man.
So, I mean, dude's going to get 12 targets. You got to play him. Second game this year with double-digit targets. Team high 146 air yards last week on those 12 targets, so he was targeted deep and often, which is a pretty good combination. It's not a great matchup for him or Tyler Boyd. I think the trade of Jalen Ramsey this week might actually motivate the Jags defense to play harder and show that they maybe they're not they're not going to just fall apart without him. But obviously, it's going to hurt the team in the long run. It can't. He's too good of a player. So, Kev, how are you feeling about these Bengal wide receivers in this matchup with the Jalen Ramsey-less Jaguars?
Well, I still just don't trust that team at all, dude. I mean, Auden Tate, yeah. I mean, at this point, he's their number one wide receiver at this point, with John Ross out, with A.J. Green out. I mean, we can't forget about Tyler Boyd, but and actually, you know what? I guess it's not a bad person to bring up. I almost forgot about him. I mean, with Tyler Boyd, without having Jalen Ramsey, I mean, that could also be another big game right there. We actually didn't think about that without Jalen Ramsey. That's, you never know. But Auden Tate you're right. He's a must-add. Especially if you're really thin at wide receiver, you got to go out and get Auden Tate.
A 12-target guy, you can't leave him on your bench or leave him available.
I mean, other than that, I mean, Joe Mixon, what has he really done? I mean, I'm staying away. I mean, if you can,
I think this is the true the test for Joe Mixon. After only 8 carries last week, he only caught 2 passes last week, so 10 touches last week. The Jaguars, they're vulnerable in their run defense. If anything, they're allowing the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. So if Joe Mixon doesn't go out and have a good game this week, then I think if you're a Mixon owner, you got to be trying to sell him, because it's just not looking good, man. He hasn't had a good game yet. And like I said, if he can't do it in this matchup, then he's not going to do it all season.
Yeah, try and sell high. I mean, I don't know if you're really going to be able to sell high, but, see if there's somebody hurting for a running back, and they might go for it. But you're absolutely, after this week, you're right. It's going to be a make or break for him on the team. And, if he has another garbage game, you gotta sell. You have to sell.
Moving on to the Chargers at the Titans. This is going to be a fun game. The Titans are apparently going to be starting Ryan Tannehill after Marcus Mariota had an absolutely abysmal game. 63 passing yards with 2 interceptions. I think I saw a stat that when they pulled him out, he had a QB rating of like 13 or something. Something absolutely horrendous. The Chargers' weakness on their defense is definitely in their run defense, allowing the 7th most fantasy points to running back. So with Tannehill starting, I'm looking for a 25-plus touch day for Derrick Henry this week. I don't know about you, but I'm not really willing to play anybody else on this team except for Delaney Walker. What you say about the Titans?
I ain't got nothing to say. I mean,
I don't know if there really is anything to say. They're just kind of
may have a chance for a little bit of a bounce back week, because you're right, the run defense on the Chargers isn't that great, but he did just have 15 touches for 28 yards last week, so that's something to keep in mind too. I don't know. I just think that team's going downhill, and I don't want any part of it.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, looking at the Chargers, talk about inconsistency, man. So Phillip Rivers had a horrible game, 3 turnovers, very uncharacteristic of him. And then another underwhelming game for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Both only caught half of their targets last week. If it wasn't for Hunter Henry's return and him just stepping right into a 9-target friggin' 100-yard, 2-touchdown game on my bench, of course, this offense would have looked absolutely horrible without him. Both running backs were held to under 80 yards combined, and this is another really tough matchup for the Chargers against this Titan defense. I think the one thing, the one silver lining, at least for the running backs, is how the Chargers have used running backs in the past game over the years with Phillip Rivers. He loves throwing the ball to the running backs. And the Titans are definitely vulnerable to pass-catching running backs. They're allowing the 8th most receptions to running backs. So maybe we see another game where Eckler and Gordon see the majority of the target share versus Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. But I think Hunter Henry is going to really kind of he's going to see a lot of the targets every week. His target share is only going to go up each week, I feel like, especially in the red zone. They've been waiting for him. They've needed him so bad, especially with all the injuries that they've been dealing with at wide receiver and with Melvin Gordon's holdout. I feel like now that he's back, they're gonna just jump right into using him as a primary receiver, which is what he should be because he's a great talent for sure. You got anything else to say about this game, Chargers Titans? I feel like it's kind of a boring game.
It's definitely a boring game. I just think one thing to point out was that, on Melvin Gordon's return, they're feeding him the ball, and it's just like excessively feeding him the ball. And they're going away from the initial game plan, which was, giving Austin Eckler the ball and, letting him do what he did. And I don't know what it is about, like, they literally have taken so many touches away from Austin Eckler, and it's so aggravating to watch. But that is something to keep in mind. Maybe something breaks, but also something to keep in mind, you bringing up Hunter Henry, is that should open up more receptions for Keenan Allen because the defenses should, because you're not only having to focus on Keenan Allen, now you got to focus on Hunter Henry too. So, that should only benefit Keenan Allen because he started off the first 3 games the best wide receiver in the game in the past 3 games, like his last 3 games, and it's been quite atrocious. So
yeah, it's crazy how he went from, I think it was like 42 targets in the first 3 weeks to, maybe 15 or 16 over the past 3 weeks. It's wild how much he's went from being so involved to so incredibly uninvolved. Yeah. But let's move on to the last game here on the podcast tonight. We got the Texans at the Colts. Both of these teams coming off of wins against the Chiefs. The Colts are coming off of a bye, but the week before they played the Chiefs, and both of these teams just ran the ball down Kansas City's throat. Marlon Mack with 32 touches and 132 rushing yards in Week 5 versus the Chiefs. Carlos Hyde with 26 carries last week and 116 rushing yards with a touchdown. He also fumbled, but both of these teams, really focused on the run against the Chiefs, and last week, I don't know if you listened to the podcast last week, but I did say that I thought Watson would have a big day with his legs because the Chiefs were in the top 10 for most receiving yards and receptions allowed to running backs, but because the Texans don't really target their running backs, only 12% target share last week for the Texans running backs, that Watson could kind of hurt them using his legs and kind of take advantage of that matchup with him, taking off and running as opposed to just dumping the ball off to a running back and having him miss a tackle or two. So, and what do you know? This week the Colts, they allow the 6th and the 8th most receptions and receiving yards to running backs. So it's another really good matchup for that part of their offense. So maybe we see another big game for Deshaun Watson as far as running the ball goes. Last week, Watson and the Texans running backs scored all 4 of the touchdowns for the Chiefs. Houston's wide receivers were both kind of disappointing, at least the 2 big ones, Hopkins and Fuller. Hopkins caught 9 of his 12 targets. Fuller only caught 5 of his 9. Both of them were under 60 yards, so it's just they didn't look all that great. And the Chiefs' defense is not all that great, so I don't know why they struggled so much. But I think they try and get back on track with their pass game a little bit. The one interesting thing here, Darren Fells with a nice game last week as well. 6 catches on his 7 targets for 70 yards. Maybe the Texans keep him more involved in this game, as the Colts defense ranks 3rd in fantasy points allowed to tight end. So if you're looking for someone to kind of throw into your tight end spot, maybe Darren Fells is not the worst option this week. So Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines, they accounted for 40% of Jacoby Brissett's completions in Week 5. Nyheim Hines actually led the team in targets with 5, only 4 targets to T.Y. Hilton. And, I expect the Colts to try and pass the ball a little more. I think they're going to have to with the Texans, with how good their offense is. And the Texans do allow the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so T.Y.'s got a good matchup. You got to figure that with this game script, they're going to be in the game a little bit more, so maybe they'll have to rely on that pass game more than they had to last week. Obviously, they just ran the hell out of the ball last week. 32 touches for Marlon Mack, who's not a big running back at all, but they just kept churning up those 2- and 3-yard plays. It reminded me a lot of the days of Thomas Jones, the 2-yard Thomas Jones. Remember those days?
Oh, do I ever? Alan Faneca. We had what was it? The center's name? How am I drawing? Oh, Nick Mangold.
Yeah.
Brickashaw Ferguson. That line right there.
That line was dope.
Lord. That line was gnarly, bro. But I was actually gonna bring that up. That you look at the Colts. Okay, you have the offensive coordinator from the Pats. What's his name?
Offensive coordinator from the Patriots. I don't know who you're talking about.
The offensive coordinator, I can't remember his name. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on this. Oh my God.
Well, whatever. We'll move on from that. We'll talk about the Colts.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. How he was supposed to have the head coaching job, and
Josh McDaniels. Now I know you're talking about.
McDaniels, okay, and then he vanishes on him. Then you have Frank Reich. He comes in, and then literally 5 minutes before the season starts, you have Andrew Luck retires on him. And then what Frank Reich has been able to do with this team and make them not only relevant in the NFL, but make them fantasy relevant is amazing. And then you have that offensive line making Marlon Mack look like a superstar. And who's the guy that they drafted from Notre Dame?
Quentin Nelson.
Dude.
Yeah, he's a beast.
He's literally making grown men look like children.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
He's ridiculous.
Their whole offensive line has been really good. I mean, they've been playing great all season. They played that was the thing that was the biggest shock to me when I heard that Andrew Luck was retiring, was that after how many years of playing on a team with an absolutely trash offensive line, he finally has a good offensive line and he decides to retire. It was so strange. But yeah, man, their offensive line has been playing great, and I completely agreed. That head coach there has been doing crazy stuff, and me being down here in Philly, I'm around so many Eagles fans, and one of my good friends, he was saying the day that they let him go, he was like, our offense is going to change. Our offense is not going to be as good.
He was right.
Yeah, man, they've been putting up. They've been really good. I mean, to go and beat the Chiefs like that, that to me it was super impressive. Every single run play was a positive run play. I don't think I saw every single time the Colts offensive line was pushing back the Chiefs defensive line. Every play. It was great. That offensive line is fantastic. The team is good. The defense hasn't been playing as well as they did last year, but I think they'll fix that. And yeah, man, I got Marlon Mack in 2 leagues, and I love it. He's been playing great. I'm gonna keep rolling him out there for sure.
And I mean, like you mentioned before, I think T.Y. Hilton's a must start. Because I have here the Texans allow the 3rd most receptions to wide receivers per game, so that's something to definitely keep in mind. Because Jacoby Brissett, you have Jack Doyle and you have Eric Ebron, but I don't think either one of them are very reliable. Again, unless, and I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, But unless they are a bye week replacement for a guy that's going on their bye week on your team, I don't trust either one of them. I don't trust either one of them. And you were going through Houston. Now, I have DeAndre Hopkins in one of my leagues, and boy, has he been a disappointment this year. And it really hurts my heart because I think I picked him like 8th overall or something like that.
Yeah, as most people did. He was a first-round pick, and he hasn't been playing like it. There's a lot of first-round wide receivers this year, second-round wide receivers that have kind of been, I don't want to say busts yet, but they haven't been great. Odell, Juju, Mike Evans.
Yeah, well, at least Mike Evans had that a couple of big games. Juju hasn't had a single big game. DeAndre Hopkins has been consistent, but not the DeAndre Hopkins we're used to, and it's so disappointing.
Yeah.
So, because the other thing that I was going to say is, like, I have Deshaun Watson, and he's been phenomenal. And I'll tell you what, Bill O'Brien looks like a genius now for going out and getting Lyle Collins from the Dolphins. People were sitting there saying, "Oh, you're going to spend a first-round draft pick on a lineman?" He looks like a genius now because 2 games ago, Deshaun Watson didn't get sacked one time. He didn't get sacked once. And, I mean, Deshaun Watson has looked phenomenal when he actually has time to throw the ball.
Yeah.
So, Deshaun Watson, phenomenal play. You were talking about the running backs on Houston. And it initially, I think the beginning of the year kind of looked like a split between Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson, but Carlos Hyde has definitely solidified himself as the main running back in that backfield, and he is definitely someone to look at because that offensive line seems to be coming into its own and kind of clicking at the right time. So that's something to keep in mind if you're really shorthanded on running backs. He's someone to go take a look at.
Yeah, if he's available for sure. So that's going to do it, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast this week. We got to figure out another week that we can do this. My schedule this week is crazy. I'm either going to be recording the NFC home games. What is today? Today is Wednesday. So either tomorrow night at a hotel in Baltimore, or I will be recording Friday night at like 12:30 at night. So I will get part 2 out there for sure. But yeah, man, we'll definitely have to figure out another week that we can get you on the podcast because this was a lot of fun. I'm glad that I got you on.
Oh, dude, I'm pumped. I'm glad I was able to do it again. But I'm just glad you got this whole phone thing now that I don't have to be there in person because you're 2 hours away and I have a little baby. So
I understand. All my good potential co-hosts are all having babies. I gotta figure out a way to put an end to that. But yeah, thanks, man, for coming on, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, bro. I'll talk to you soon, man.
And may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. For more episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Beers and Bruisers is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach TV, or your favorite podcast service. Beers and Bruisers is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com or download the free HC Universal Network app today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gaming operates a national problem gambling helpline network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Beers and Bruisers Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to drink responsibly and always look for your man downfield.